Do the roll call.
Let's see here. This may be a little day. I've got Jason Asbury,
Here.
David Mills, Jim Dodrell, Brian Hoyleman. Let's see, Mr. Foster's here, and Mr. Haba,
Yeah, we
and
actually,
Jacob.
we added Mr. Haba and Jacob.
Okay.
Do you want to go over the iPads with everybody? Just so
Yeah,
they can,
okay, that'd be great.
before we keep going much further.
So I've got everything set up here. I've got 6 documents that I think will be relevant to our discussion tonight. I've got them numbered. Number 1 is just a basic agenda of things that we'll be talking about today. Number 2, is the minutes from the last meeting, which was apparently August 24th, which Jason and I will sign off on. Number 3 is the actual document with notes. That'll be the main document we'll be using tonight to hash over these topics we'll be discussing. And if you see down the left side, you can go from, you don't necessarily have to scroll with your finger. You can if you want, or you can just pick the document down the left side, either way, or the page, rather. The next sheet is that map that we talked about at the last Putnam County Planning Commission meeting, where we kind of got in a sticking point, the one that got tabled. So that'll be something we'll talk about tonight. We're also going to talk about the planned unit development. That is document number 4. That is the entire ordinance relative to PUDs. The next document is the 7-1-3U document, the WBCA document. Mr. Foster's familiar with that, relative to streams and culverts and such. And also I threw in drainage and storm sewer article too, just in case we needed to refer to that in any way. So whenever we change documents, all you have to do is just tap on it and you're good to go. If you want to go back to any other document, you can hit the little, hit the button, and it'll take you back.
You can also swipe left or right.
Yeah.
If you're in a document and you want to go to the document to the left or the right.
Exactly.
You can do that as well.
Well, I'm impressed.
That's pretty sweet.
It is nice.
Jacob and I are,
Yep.
yeah.
It should save you guys a lot of time in the office too, shouldn't it?
Absolutely, it does.
Probably,
Yeah, the web, it's set up, here, look, there's 6 documents here. I email this number 1 unit 6 documents, and it automatically loads to all of these. And then when we're done with that document, take it off here, automatically deletes from all of them.
it'd be nice
So-
just to have the ordinance loaded in here for us too.
We could
Just
do that.
That way, if we wanted to reference something while we're sitting here, we're not going through the
Absolutely do
binder.
that.
Basically a repository where you can not only put stuff like that, have a document database, and stuff like this there, agendas, and also message other members of the board back and forth, all within one app.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Call.
Got a rig over here where got them all, I can plug them all in and charge them at one time, so
That's pretty sweet.
save a little time there too.
Come a long ways in the last 5 years with technology here. It's great.
Hopefully we'll save some paper.
All right, and on your iPad, the meeting minutes from our August 24th subcommittee are there. If you guys would like to review and then entertain a motion to accept. A motion, have a second? A motion to accept the minutes. Anybody want a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, next on the agenda here is citizens' concerns. This would be to address anything that's not on our agenda for this evening. Okay. The records reflect no citizen concerns. I'm going to go a little off script. In the past, the setting president of the Planning Commission did not chair this subcommittee. I'm happy to step down as chair. If you guys would like to appoint a new chair, I'd still be at the meetings, or I'm also happy to continue to chair the meetings as well. It's really up to you guys. I'll leave it one way or the other. Hurt my feelings either.
Makes no difference to me.
Don't make any difference.
Second it.
Favor?
Aye.
That would be fine. All right, first thing up tonight for review is the proposed text amendment that we heard at the last Planning Commission meeting that was voted to be tabled and sent back to us. That was on, let's see, bear with me. Yeah, help me out here, Mr. Call.
Yeah, that was on the one lot
One lot.
exemption relative to duplexes and, or major subdivisions consisting of duplexes and townhomes. And the sticking point was language that was copied into the proposed added language, and it was the 20% that seemed to be what everyone was unsure about. So we decided to table it and talk about it here at this, in this forum. Basically, if you'll look at the next document, which is 3A, it's a representative of a subdivision that consists of duplexes and townhouses. And if you'll notice, the building that has the red circle around it is the one we were discussing. And instead of granting this individual a one-lot exemption for just one of the tiny little lots per dwelling unit, in order for him to have capital to fund the rest of the development, we were kicking around the prospect of allowing him to record and sell all 4 lots associated with that townhouse building, as opposed to just one little slice of it. And then there was language that was basically copied from the language that had been in the ordinance forever, or about the one-lot exemption, and that included the 20% figure that possibly is not relevant in this particular situation. So it's something that we felt needed to be tabled and rediscussed so we could get it just right.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm interested in hearing from Mr. Hobble on this one. He's probably got the most experience when it comes to these type of situations and probably how to improve this. But, I would be in favor of taking the 20, from looking at it on a townhouse or a multi-unit situation, removing the 20% completely and limiting that one lot exemption to whatever the largest unit is that could be built. So if the ordinance allows an 8-unit structure, then you could get a one lot exemption for that entire 8-unit.
Up to a 1/8.
Yeah, up to whatever the maximum.
Well, if you all would let me, I'm going to try to wear 2 hats. One, what it's like in the field, and one, what it would be like if somebody in the field came in and gave a presentation, what we might be thinking about. So first of all, I completely agree with Jason. The 20% muddies the water a little bit. So I would probably respectfully suggest for now, let's just put that on the side and let's not think about that. And David, you were helpful on an email to me that townhouses are usually fourplexes, but sometimes they can be 6 and 8 and 10. You know, if you leave West Virginia, who knows what they could be. So the reality of it is, for example, if I was doing this development, and the advantage to me would be, let's say it takes 3, 4, or 5 months from the time we break ground until all the infrastructure's in, and I get as-bills done, and we can provide those to your group, and they can look at it and verify everything and check that. All right, then at that point, if we start building something, that building could take 5, 6, 7, 8 months. With supply chain issues, it could take, you know, who knows what it could take. But from a developer standpoint, if I'm doing the infrastructure, no bank is going, I can't sell any lots to individuals. No bank's going to do a loan for me or anyone else on a duplex or a single-family house unless it's already approved through the planning commission. So the only way this can benefit the developer is if I have the wherewithal to not only borrow the money from the same bank to do the development, but also borrow the same money from the same bank to build the structure, okay? So the real advantage to the developer is while they're spending 3 or 4 or 5 months doing the infrastructure, they also have their crews building that single-family home or that 10-unit townhouse row at the same time, because those subcontractors can run around where they're working. They can go up through the gravel and what have you. So in reality, the benefit would be if I came here to do a 50 townhouse, 5, 10-unit buildings, and I could get permission to start on one of the buildings while I'm doing the infrastructure, then basically, when I get it finally approved and we finish that that building up with the finishing touches, then I could start either renting it or selling it or whatever I was going to do at that point, and I can save 5 or 6 months in the process. So that would help the developer immensely. Now, there was also some concern, well, where is it per the road and what have you? I think we could probably take that out too, because I would say that it would be very rare that a builder would have the unit built before the infrastructure was in. That would seem almost impossible to me. So I would say that the key would be, as you're building that 4-plex or 10-plex and you're doing the infrastructure, 99 times out of 100, that infrastructure will be done before that building is ever complete. So the fear of saying, go ahead and sell the units in the building, even though you can't get to it, that should be taken off the table. That should never come to be a reality. But putting this hat on, I would say, I don't care if the building is done or not. You know, you can't sell those until the development is finalized. That would be my opinion. And then what would happen if you're going to do a townhouse development and there's just one 10-unit building? These are the kind of things that just kind of want us all to think about, because the more thoughtful we can be, then when those special circumstances come to us, we could have already planned on what a reaction is and what should be normal and what should be abnormal.
I think some of the language relative to that last statement, though, it does, in the proposed language, state multiple family dwellings. So like one 10-unit building wouldn't necessarily be relevant to this language, but I understand your point.
And I'm looking at it from a developer standpoint too, but I wouldn't want to be, ridiculously unreasonable. And, the gray areas are where you can either benefit from or be hurt from. So the more we can just make it black and white and easy to understand, I think we distance ourselves from the disagreements that inevitably will happen. But the big advantage from a builder-developer is if I can start one of those buildings while I'm doing that infrastructure, knowing daggone well that infrastructure is going to be done before I'm done with that building. And I wouldn't be worried about if there's an adjoining street close to the building, because you may have a reason to put that building, the first one, in the middle of the, like this one, in the middle of the development. But then again, if the infrastructure's not in, then I wouldn't think it would be prudent to give anybody a CO or a thumbs up on selling the units, because they can't sell them anyway, because no bank's going to finance it.
So your scenario there, you're constructing the townhouse towards the back, maybe, of the development where it can be constructed, and then the road and infrastructure put in after it's constructed?
While it's going on.
Well, yeah, exactly, simultaneously.
Yeah, so the first thing you go out there and you gotta do your site work, although
Yeah.
some developers do their site work before anything else, and I guess, depending on how they look at it, that's doable or not. And then your sewer and your storm drain are in competition with each other. And then you're putting gravel in, you're trying to look at the crossovers, the gas is the last thing, the water is important too, and then you start doing the streets. And when you start doing concrete streets, and there's a section there for asphalt and concrete, I noticed that was in there too. I have not seen an asphalt subdivision that didn't fail in this state. That's why we do concrete all the time. But basically, when you're doing concrete, you go to the very far end and you start working your way out. You'll do 500 or 600 feet on the left side, 500 or 600 feet on the right, and just keep working your way out. And then when you come out to the mouth of the subdivision on the main road, you pour that last little bit of concrete, then you put a barrier up, because you don't want anybody to drive a car on any of it, or at least the most recent one, and that's at the mouth of the subdivision. So that's how it happens. But the real win would be to know that if I developed a development, then I would only have a month or two left, and I could finish up that 4-plex or that 10-plex, and then I could start selling things while I'm working on other items. If that helps.
Going down that road, I think it's another issue we had, to do what Mr. Haba was saying, is we'd have to go back, and the way I understand the preliminary plat approval, we'd have to make revisions to that, because that preliminary plat approval requires all of your streets and infrastructure to be built prior to getting that one lot exemption. Correct?
That could be what, yeah, that's one of the reasons some of this language is, where it calls out the 500 feet to the entry and things such as that. The drop inlets and,
I think that needs to be looked
But again, for that building that was started, that's a very legitimate statement, is that the infrastructure has to be done before you can sell it. But it would be I think the intent a long time ago was not really to sell it, but to actually do whatever you could do to start building it, to get funds to start building it.
Right.
And there's a difference between starting construction on it and actually being able to sell what you built.
because you were talking about those things going on simultaneously.
Yes.
The erection of the 4-unit or whatever it is, while infrastructure's going in.
That could be a nice win for somebody. Yes, but again, you'd have to use your own money, or you'd have to use the same bank that did that. I could not, like in the development that we had, if you had came and said, I want that corner lot, well, you'd have been paying cash for it, because no bank would loan you the money while I'm
At
in the
that point,
process,
right.
because there's so much fraud out there.
Right.
I don't know if we do or don't.
This discussion started with the townhomes simply because, the one lot exemption, the townhome lots are so tiny you know, they're just getting a little sliver as compared to, you know, if you're building a big, you know, luxury, single-family dwelling subdivision. And also, you know, lots of times the end lots on the townhouses are nice and big and spacious, but the interior lots are just tiny little slivers, you know. So if we could think of a way to allow the townhome duplex developer a way to get some more working capital, would be advantageous. So,
You can just strike.
right, that seems to be for sure.
You know, simplest thing, just look at just the current text here. Just looking at the current text here is to strike out what Mr. Call has highlighted in yellow. Just completely strike that from the text amendment.
I would agree. I don't believe it adds any value, honestly.
20%? Just a little background. Based on the way it was explained to me, the reason for this is a long time ago, somebody had a relatively big subdivision. They sold a lot in the middle of it, and then they never completed the infrastructure to it. So somebody got stuck with a house with no water. So, I mean, I don't know how you fix that unless you don't allow the sale of anything until they at least have all those utilities and road and everything to whichever one they want to start on, which, Dave, I don't see that would affect what you're saying either. You could still be building on that while you're putting your infrastructure in, but you certainly want the infrastructure to that house before you allow it to be sold.
I think there was a situation, a friend of mine that we built a house for, it was a subdivision around Eleanor. And somebody was going to put the infrastructure and all in. And it was a nightmare. And this guy that I built a home for bought a lot and paid cash for the lot. And then it could be the same one.
Maybe.
And it was right in the middle of it. And the guy went bankrupt and never finished anything. So he ended up selling his $75,000 lot in the middle of 400 acres for just hardly nothing.
Right.
But I think that I think the only way someone could buy a lot in a subdivision, a single lot, is they were a cash buyer. So I think to protect them as well, I think you have to give some consideration, you know, having the developer sell one single-family lot for cash would help him a little bit. It won't help him with townhomes or anything, but it could help him. But if the guy or gal buys the lot in the middle of the subdivision and it's not already done, and he pays it for cash, because the bank won't loan him any money on it, then he or she is at risk. So, and it goes against what the original concept was, but maybe they could start building, the developer could start building a structure, whether it's a single-family home or a row of townhouses, but yet he could not close and sell those until the infrastructure was in and approved. I think that's the easiest way to protect cash buyers, and I think that's what real life is out in the field.
Yeah, I don't think that's unreasonable at all. I guess the question, go ahead.
Got a brother $1 million house. Fortunately, they had a vision that allowed the utilities to leave them hundreds of acres. So it's like he's living in paradise right now.
Wow.
Until somebody else buys something else. That's because they were.
You would want to be building if possible, yes.
So let's say you do that, you're starting on phase one. You've got the building built, and this exemption will allow you to start something unit one, unit two, unit three. But before you can go to your next phase, according to this, you have to either have that first phase served by existing streets or streets defined as shall determine are consistent with the final approval of the subdivision. So you'd have to have your, some sort of street access, utility access already to that phase before you're gonna get your exemption for your next phase. Does that make sense?
We'd have to have infrastructure in place in order to access the property that's,
Yeah, that's assuming that you've got to go through phase one to get through phase two. There's always a unique situation where you have phase one and you can go left, right, or straight for phase 2, 3, or 4.
You can even have phase one back to back, you build out toward the bow. But you have to, if you want to start back there, you're gonna have to have.
All utilities there, yes.
Before you get your exemption on the next phase. That's what this says.
yeah.
Would that get it?
I think that the way this is worded, a single lot developer could sell a lot before it's finalized. But in real life, that person can only buy that lot if he pays cash. That can still happen. So if a multi-unit developer was developing a development for 2s, 3s, and 4s, and 10s, then we're saying, wording is saying that he could sell the footprints for a fourplex to 4 different people. But again, until the infrastructure's there and it's approved by planning, then no bank is going to loan money on that. It really won't do them any good.
But you're not going to have four or 5 different people lined up to pay cash for.
Yeah, if I was a developer, I would want deposits, absolutely. And an honest developer would put them in an escrow account. An unhonest developer would go buy a four-wheeler and a boat. But putting a deposit down is different than trying to buy a lot. And maybe if this was a situation that somebody bought a footprint in the middle of a field and they closed on it with cash, then they would be looking at how did this happen? You know, and how did that person, starting a building is one thing, and that would be a grateful option for a developer. But closing on a lot, or closing on a home, or closing on something without the infrastructure being done so that commodes could be flushed, water could be turned on, streets, curbs, all the things that's required in a development, I think is an error.
Sounds to me like this one may not be ready for public consumption yet.
Bank's not going to loan money on it until it's approved subdivision.
So the bank's going to require that planning give the developer something that says it's approved. The bank's not necessarily caring about the infrastructure. If you have a letter saying that that's approved to be sold.
Well, that could be true, if they didn't know enough.
Looking to finance John Doe's purchase of one of those pieces of property. And one of the things I'm concerned about is getting a good engineering or home inspection report to say that everything's working, and there's no water, no gas, no nothing else hooked up to the house. How am I gonna get final approval on that? I'm gonna do it.
No. If a bank had knowledge, they would not loan money on that.
Just a little more history. The part in yellow is literally from where the ordinance was written to allow it used to be just one-time exemption, period, but it was changed to allow somebody who wasn't a huge builder, because we don't want to just restrict it to the guys that have all the money in the world. You want to be able to have some local people do it as well. So something that might have had 100 lots in it, if somebody wanted to do it in phases of 25 lots each, then each one of them would have been able to have a one-time lot exemption to help them along the way for each one. That was the whole purpose behind it. And so that they couldn't pull a fast one on you and say, okay, we're going to build one house in this phase and one house, you know, where they piecemealed it. That's why that 20%'s in there. So I don't know that it's really applicable to what we're doing now.
Yeah,
So
I
you
would,
could probably eliminate that altogether.
yeah, I think we're in agreement there that for when talking about single or multifamily duplex units, that's not an applicable requirement. And I mean, we can clean that up, I think.
So we may not have all the answers tonight, but we could agree that one sentence could go away.
Yeah. If somebody would like to make a motion that that's struck, we could handle that.
I would like to make a motion that we strike that sentence because I don't believe it adds any relevant value to what we're trying to do with this section.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Okay, one of the next thing on the agenda, Mr. Asbury had expressed some concern about the subdivision of rural properties. Based upon some conversations with folks in the industry, they continue to run into issues with some of the following limitations on subdivisions of property, especially in rural areas. Families wanting to break up large farms amongst children after parents have passed away, et cetera. If you look at your document, the text in the purplish color, that is the text directly from the ordinances relative to subdivisions. You have your exempt subdivisions, you have your administrative subdivisions, and your major subdivisions. You know, this is the data that's in the book right now. You know, if there's anything in here that we want to discuss to try to make the separation of property amongst children after a loved one has passed away, then that's something we can talk about here. Right now, there are restrictions relative to what a minor and a major subdivision are, you know, relative to 3 lots and under or 3 lots and over. And that's something to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, this came up. I've had several people reach out that, you know, they've been surveyors that have had this come before them at their companies, and you know, they have, you know, 100 acres or 200 acres that, you know, mom and dad passed away and there's 4 kids. They'd like to split it. They can't split it because you can't split it more than 3 lots. There's also some restrictions here on, you know, everything has to be fronted off a road. There's also some time restrictions that, you know, that there's no time limit. So, you know, how long? So if you subdivide it now, and you subdivide 3 lots or 2 lots, you know, at some point there's nothing there that says that you can go back and re-subdivide it. That's eventually runs out. And then also, one of the other concerns that came up was that if you have an existing property or a farm, and on that existing property you have a 15-foot wide right-of-way that's recorded on the parcel, and it's part of that property, when that parcel goes to be subdivided, our ordinance requires that 15-foot wide right-of-way to go to 40. So if I'm accessing Mr. Dodrell's property, and him and I have agreed to 15 foot, and that's what he's deeded to me in my parcel, and then I sell it, that buyer now has to go back to Mr. Dodrell and see if Mr. Dodrell will give him the 40 foot, because that's what the ordinance requires. These are all, like I said, concerns that have come across my desk from different surveyors in our area, that this has come before them.
May I speak to my direct experiences with this?
Yes, please.
Anytime that you have a right-of-way off of a road to a piece of property, you'd like to get a 30, 40, 50, 60-foot right-of-way. And with us pulling trailers, we want it really wide in the mouth of that. But the Division of Highways, they send a guy out there, and he wants to do 10 or 12, 15 feet. You know, he just wants you to put it all in one 20-foot culvert. And, you know, he'll say stupid things that'll just justify his position, because there's always an engineer or someone he reports to that they don't want to give 40-foot right-of-ways. In my opinion, a 40-foot right-of-way should be the norm for new things, but 50 years ago, 15-foot was the norm. And if the Division of Highway is going to buck you and argue with you, trying to put more than a 20-foot culvert in, then maybe there is a place and a reason why 15 should be grandfathered in. I can tell you that the time limit concerns me, because in West Virginia, there's always those farms that were owned by families, and the kids want it, and there's 15-foot right-of-way. They want to split it up 3 different ways, but ultimately, once those kids get that split up, within 1, 2, 3 years, they're going to sell it to somebody else. So it's not just the intention is excellent, where you want to do something for family members, but today, how many months or years is it going to be to where those family members aren't related to each other anymore, and they're all different people?
Yeah, that's the concern in the planning department, is that the immediate, just as you said, would be a benefit, but 2, 3, 4 years down the road, and it's sold, then.
And they're going to be sold.
Right.
And they're going to have single-wide trailers on there, and they're going to be people who aren't related to each other, and this place still going to be within the 2-year time frame. So then the pressure, it seems like, by having that 2-year restriction, either I would respectfully suggest whatever you do it consistently from day one, and you eliminate the time thing, because that's just more burden on your department coming back when that happens, and the black sheep of the families gets that single wide and sells it to somebody nobody likes, and then it's just something that you've got to manage and deal with a second time. So I would the first thing I would consider doing is getting rid of the time limit, and then deciding how you want to do the fifth grandfather something in, or require something new.
You're saying you want to get rid of the 2-year reconveyance restriction?
Yeah, I don't know why you'd have that in there. I mean, to me, that's saying that if the,
I can see why. Because if they sell it within 2 years, then it's no longer exempt under that section.
so then who has to deal with
Then
that?
The other subdivision regulations.
But it's already done. There's already a mortgage on that single wide, and somebody else is already living in it because they bought it, and it's just going to be a nightmare.
They bought it before the 2 years is up?
I can see that happening, yes.
Yeah, but if that happens, what they're saying is, like, if my parents, they're long gone, but if they were died and left me, then my brothers and sisters, we split up under this, 400 acres, so I got 100 acres. If I sell that to you within 2 years, the fact that all the exemptions under here no longer apply, so you'd have to proceed under either a major subdivision or a minor subdivision.
But the deal's already done. I mean, are you talking about if you were going to break up yours again?
Yes, because that's a reconveyance, like, so if I sell I get it in the will or whatever.
Okay, all right,
Then
maybe
I'm
I
gonna sell it to you, and so you can develop it or whatever. Then the protections that I would get under it being exempt, it would no longer be an exempt subdivision.
You can only subdivide at one time.
Right.
Right, and that, but I understood this, that if you divide it at one time, maybe I'm misunderstanding it, that you were grandfathered in on a 15-foot right-of-way because you were all related to each other and you split it all up. Are there two different parts?
You're still grandfathered in.
Well, I,
And I'm probably
Made
I
confused.
think the-
ultimate owner and not to a member of the grantor's family.
I think
In such case,
the-
requirements of this ordinance shall be.
I think the time limit here is not necessarily, the concern on the time limit was not, I don't have my other notes with me, that's what I was looking for, was not necessarily on the 2-year reconveyance. It was, if I come before you and we've split this 3 ways in our family, then that's that way for perpetuity. There is no time limit that says after 15 years, I can go back and then re-subdivide that into 3 more lots. I think that was the concern on the time limit, that it was, that once that's split 3 ways, that's split 3 ways for the rest of that property's life. There is no, right, unless it was merged, unless you merged that, like took 2 of the 3 parcels, put them back together. And what the concern was, or what the question was could you not say, okay, this 3-lot subdivision exemption is good for 15 years, or is good for 5 years, or is good for whatever time limit we wanted to pose. The concern is the fact that there is no time limit on that being a major subdivision in this case.
Okay.
Because if, so you split it between your brothers, and then you want to split your portion between your kids, you can't do it. Like if you wanted to subdivide yours out.
So, in that situation, if one of the kids who got the, let's say, again, 400 acres, divided up between 4 kids after the parents died. I got this 100 acres. I died. I want to divide that 100 acres up between my 5 kids. Give them each 20 acres. I can't do that.
My understanding of the way this is written is you can't. And I'll stand for correction, but that was the concern. That was the gist of this concern that was. Because I believe whatever you want to do with your 100 acres should be your whatever you want to do with it amongst your family. And you couldn't divide it between 4, you can only divide it by 3 of your kids. You got, yeah.
Yeah, I think it should be, division of an existing lot into not more than however many acres is determined appropriate by the planning commission. You got a whole gaggle of kids coming in that are gonna inherit their parents' farm. You might say, okay, you can divide it up 6 ways.
I don't believe when we're talking exempt subdivision, could be wrong here, but I don't think that falls under, obviously not more than 3, no, I'm sorry. Okay, the exempt subdivision shall involve the division of a continuous tract of real estate, 1, between or to the following named members of the family of the grantor: father, mother, son, daughter, stepson, stepdaughter, grandson, or granddaughter, brother or sister, or 2, because of inheritance or court action. Provided, however, that if any lot is reconvened within 2 years of the date of the original conveyance, then that conveyance will be deemed to have been made directly to such ultimate owner and not a member of the grantor's original family. So I'm not sure that that argument is relevant to an exempt subdivision as much as it's relevant to what we call an administrative subdivision, which is not more than 3. More than 3 becomes a major subdivision. But
Well, and then,
exempt subdivision, I mean, I don't think it matters if it's 3 kids, 5 kids, 6 kids, 8
It
kids,
says not more than 3 lots fronting an existing street.
under the exempt.
yeah.
See, it appears that you can have an exempt subdivision, you can split it 3 ways with family, or you can go to administrative and split it 3 ways with anybody you want to, but if you split it with family, then you have a 2-year kickback clause if a family member sells to somebody. You could almost eliminate, I mean, there's only a negative associated with a exempt subdivision versus an administrative subdivision.
I mean, to further muddy the water, what, you know, we're sitting here saying 3 lots fronting on an existing street. Is that paved? I got 1,000 acres. I mean, I think there's a lot, I mean, I don't know if we can slay all these dragons on this one tonight, but I think there's a lot on this one, I think, that needs to be dived into. Because this is, in my opinion, somewhat problematic. And I don't have all the answers other than it's an issue. I mean, I think the easiest one, in my opinion, right now to address is grandfathering in the existing right-of-way that's recorded on a parcel. I mean, to me, that's a no-brainer. If you have a recorded parcel with an existing right-of-way recorded on that tract, that should be grandfathered in. And then anything that's new without a right-of-way on it should meet the minimum requirements. But yeah, I'm not a believer in not grandfathering things in.
What kind of time period are we talking about relative to the grandfather? Just whatever it's, whatever the deed says at the, at the time of the passing?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Which we need a motion for that, if everybody's in agreement for that. Second. All in favor?
Aye. Could we revisit the exempt subdivision for family members in the administrative subdivision?
Absolutely.
I look at them, they're split in the same way. Unless I'm not seeing a word that you all are, there's the only difference between an exempt subdivision and administrative subdivision is the exempt is for family members, and if they don't do what they're supposed to do in 2 years, it can all be null and void. I think it's being split the same way.
It looks like to me, for the exempt subdivision of family members, it kind of looks like somebody set it up to prevent one family member from talking everybody into dividing it out and then selling their parcel within 2 years to then create some conflict maybe within the family. That's kind of what it looks like it's there for.
Does anybody see any advantages that a family or anybody would want to try to use an exempt subdivision versus an administrative subdivision? Unless it was the parent that was trying to keep your family members together. We all know how fun that is.
I don't have kids.
I mean, there's so much more flexibility in an administrative subdivision than an exempt subdivision.
Yeah, I don't see, I'm in agreement with Dave here on that. I don't see the advantage or a difference.
And it's a Monday, so I may not be reading a very important sentence. If I'm not, just yell at me, say, look at sentence numbers, whatever. But it's really, to me, it's fruitless.
Is there anything different, David, between the two on the approval process? Is there one?
Looks like there's some inserts of family members, and that's the only difference I see. They're trying to tie it to family members, eligibility, or what a family member is, and then the condition, if you mess up in 2 years, it all goes back, and it's not like it ever happened.
Yeah, I agree.
Honestly, done real estate work for a long time. Been involved in a family dispute out in Lane County that ended up in litigation, and I'm trying to recall back to that, and this makes no sense to me. I do not understand the differences between an exempt subdivision and administrative subdivision. Like you said,
I don't either.
so we take a look at, there's some model language out there on subdivisions, see if there's something we should maybe place this with.
Well, and to me, I mean, I think of a subdivision as something Mr. Haba does, right? I don't think of a subdivision if I own 1,000 acres and I want to split that 1,000 acres. Subdividing a parcel and a subdivision, in my opinion, should be defined as two different things. And maybe that's the path forward here, is creating a clear definition of a subdivision and then subdividing existing property. Because I believe that if I wanted to go out and subdivide 1,000 acres and deed that ownership off to whoever, that should be my right as that property owner. And then if you want to develop that, then our ordinance has mechanisms in place that you then have to follow to develop a residential subdivision.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you want to split a 1,000 acre parcel into 3 or 4 parcels and sell them as a farm or a hunting place to go hunt or whatever, doesn't make it a subdivision. But if
Right.
you're going to split it up and your intention is to make it a residential subdivision, that's where I think the county has an interest in making sure you get the infrastructure in place and everything else.
Now, there is a difference between an improved subdivision with utilities and taking 1,000 acres and just splitting it 4 different ways for people who want to hunt.
But the way this reads, hunting parcel would be included in this as
Yeah,
well.
it feels like we're putting a square peg in a round hole on this one and trying to lump everything into a true definition of a improved subdivision.
Mr. Hobble, what, could you repeat what you said just a moment ago? I thought that was profound.
Well, there's a difference between developing an improved development, putting an improved development in with the infrastructure, and taking 1,000 acres and splitting it up for places to hunt.
Hunt, graze, cattle.
Whatever.
Sure.
You'd still want, even if you did that, if you had a 100-acre lot, you divided it, you still want to make sure that you got to be able to,
Oh, for sure.
other than that,
Yeah, it says in the ordinance, though, that you have to be on, it has to be fronting an existing street, so that takes care of a lot of the issues right there.
yeah, but that's a problem, really, because what if it's not?
What
Get
if,
it approved right now?
Then,
if me and you,
It's on the backside of the lot.
if you wanted to split 100 acres with Jeff and Ron Allen, and Jeff's getting a parcel that's 50 acres in the back that doesn't front, it wouldn't be allowed. In my opinion, it should be required that you put a right-of-way to that, to his
if you go to
portion.
the back parcel.
Right, yeah, but,
The way I understand this,
right,
the way I understand this, you can't do that, though.
correct, that's what we're saying, we're taking issue with that.
You're taking issue because it does not say that if one of the parcels does not front the street, you cannot do it?
Right.
Does that not say it the way it is already stated here? Because an administrative subdivision would, I guess if you try to do it in 2 different steps and say 2 of them were on the road, then you could get an administrative subdivision, but then how do you get the one in the back?
That's what we're trying to tackle. That's what, in my opinion, that if you wanted to do that scenario and you put a right-of-way and deeded a right-of-way across those other 2 parcels to the one in the back, that should be all you need.
You should be able to do that,
That's what
yeah.
you should be able to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the way this is written, that's not, you can't do that right now.
Is there not something elsewhere in the ordinances that would cover a circumstance like that? Yeah, if you're building, if you're parceling off something to a family member in the back part of the property, is there anything else in the ordinance that tells that you must have a right-of-way back to it?
Oh, yeah, you cannot be landlocked, or you can't
Well, then-
divide the property.
Then maybe it's already addressed then.
Yeah, the right-of-way has to be provided. Now, if we're going back and talking about the old 15-foot versus the current desired 40, that's something else, but, yeah, it can't be landlocked.
So let me pose another question to you. Let's say that you have a pretty big parcel, and you do this 3-lot exemption, and now you want to do the big parcel in the back, you have to have that 40-foot right-of-way to get to it, right? According to the ordinance?
Under the current
So you would
ordinance.
have a 15-foot right-of-way, and then going to a 40-foot right-of-way. But the 40-foot right-of-way, if you don't have 40 all the way down, according to the ordinance, you probably can't put a subdivision in back there anyway without getting the 40-foot
You have to get the 40
on this
foot.
initial parcel. Exactly.
But if I'm the guy owning that back lot, I probably want 40 foot right away back.
The way I see it.
Yeah.
I don't, according to this subdivision, period. You have a 50-foot by 2,000-foot piece of land. You wouldn't be able to subdivide it. Unless you did a 12-foot strip all the way down. You can't do it. The way this is worded, it ruins it.
The tough one.
I guess my question is, if you run into a situation where there's a grandfathered in 15-foot right-of-way, then that stays as it is. But any new right-of-ways are required to be 40-foot, is that correct? So you wouldn't allow anybody to do an administrative or a family or an exempt or any kind of subdivision with a new right-of-way that wasn't 40 feet?
We've actually had some coming from the planning commission where there was a certain size right-of-way that went down to too narrow of a right-of-way and then opened back up, and it was a parcel that, somebody wanted to build a house on. And I think in that particular circumstance, we approved it because it was the only way to get to it.
But it still requires steps to get there. Bring that.
Yeah, it came in front of the planning commission. The planning commission had to approve it. I think the reason behind that 40-foot is for circumstances kind of like that. So maybe it's not as bad idea as might seem on the surface.
Well, it protects the future, the
Yes.
future owner, as opposed to what's going on right now. Now, there are situations where there are exempt subdivisions, where there are, as a matter of fact, there's one in the office right now where there's a little 15-foot, right away, and it's just a little exempt subdivision where parents passed away and a couple of kids are getting some land, the 15-foot right away. It's not landlocked or anything like that, but that situation, you just got to look ahead, as to what happens in the future.
The world of water and wastewater, you're gonna put in a 4-inch pipe for property. Public Service Commission regulations, property has the potential to change the pipe in 6 inch. Because there's potential that. Maybe we could reword this to initial subdivision, could keep the existing right of way, unless there's a potential for something. Then you would go to. That way, if it's breaking it up into 3 half-acre lots, break it up into 200 acre lots.
Good point. Subdivided land on, you've got the gigantic parcel on the backside, which initially that one kid's gonna use for hunting. But then, he or she died later on, or they changed their mind. They didn't want to subdivide that into a piece of residential subdivision. If they're stuck with a 15-foot right-of-way, you're gonna end up try to put, 50 townhouses out there. There's no way that 15-foot right-of-way is gonna get that.
What happens if I own the first section that has the 15-foot right-of-way?
I understand, I hear you.
And I'm gonna tell you no. I mean, because I'm not the one selling that. I gave you 15 feet.
Right.
You're not getting another 25 feet.
I hear you.
How do you can't.
You block it.
Yep.
Why,
The government committed to condemn it.
Well, you can go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and get a, whatever, variance or whatever, and still maybe get approval to put one in, but I sure wouldn't buy property and guess that I would get.
No, I
one
wouldn't.
in.
I wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't buy it on that condition. I'm just saying it can happen.
I mean,
value that.
just food for thought. If you're under one of these administrative or you're under a exempt subdivision and you sell your parcel sometime in the future, and maybe there would be some merit to having a clause in there that when you transfer that property the next time, there has to be a 40-foot right-of-way on it. Or if you're getting this exempt subdivision or an administrative subdivision, you have a certain amount of setback for any residence so that at a future date, you would be able to get a 40-foot
I
right-of-way
agree,
in
but
there.
I also think the way I understand the current ordinance in Ron's situation, if we've subdivided this 3 lots, you took 100 acres and made it into 3 lots, and I go to sell my lot down the road, it can't be subdivided. I have to sell it for whatever it is because there is no time restriction. That's still a major subdivision out of that parcel, or an exempt subdivision. There is no mechanism or avenue for that new owner to subdivide that lot again. I think that's part of this concern.
That
because-
was always my understanding, is there was a regulation that happened years and years ago, and I was told that you can separate a large tract, or, I mean, I'm always looking at larger tracts. I'm not trying to normally separate something real small, but let's say you had 100 acres. If that was not separated after that specific date, and I really don't know what date that was, it was probably in the 80s or 90s, then you could still do it 3 times, or you'll keep the residual and peel off 3, as long as they had some access to a road or a right-of-way. But once you buy, I mean, it's okay to buy a piece of property and know that it's never going to be developed, because some properties never should be developed. Worrying about townhouses or that $1 million commercial property out on Evergreen, I mean, it's just not going to happen. But I thought there was a time frame, a date. If it was after that date,
Yeah,
you could no longer do that. You had to do the administrative subdivision.
Which goes back to, Jim's, willed his 100 acres to his kids. His kids, for the rest of their lives, own 100 acres. That's all they got. And
That runs
I don't like it.
so afoul of all, you got, maybe thinking our forefathers and mothers would find that acceptable.
No, I think that at a minimum, there should be some type of, if we wanted to put a time limit on it, I personally, I don't know, I could be fine with no time limit, because I think if you,
I think as long as you put protections in place that they have to get it approved properly, then, they ought to be able to do it. I mean, they might turn around a year from now and, two or three of the siblings decide they need money, they want to sell it to the brother or sister, and then that person wants to then subdivide it again, or whatever, they ought to be able to at least, if it's workable, get it approved.
yeah, there should be an avenue for them to go through to determine if it's developable or not just being told they can't re-subdivide.
Then you're just saying, okay, it's because the law says it, even though you could probably build 50 nice townhomes on it, too bad, you gotta keep it a farm. That's just not right.
Or you have to follow the rules to get it to where it's able to accept the 50
Right.
townhomes.
In reality, most likely you'd have to get all 3 parcels where you could purchase them at once, then put the 40-foot right-of-way in yourself. That's the only way you could put that
If you're gonna
land back
grandfather it.
into service.
Yeah,
And
if
that's
you're
not
allowed
good.
grandfather, that's the only way to do it. The only way to avoid that is just say, nope, it's gotta be 40 foot in the beginning and not grandfather them in.
But I see Mr. Ashbury's, we're looking at, what if you're talking half acre? 40 foot away from that. That's why I was seeing.
Well, Jason has another good point too, because let's assume that that first parcel is the 25 acres. As you're driving back that road.
That's right.
It's easy to go 40 foot, but you still can't subdivide it.
Well, and
Because that
also-
person could give the 40 foot right away and put that land back into service.
It kind of goes back to my point that, let's say Ron owns the first, Ron's not the family member and Ron owns that parcel that my 100 acres access, he gave my grandfather an access easement, access his 1,000-acre hunting camp behind his property. And then Ron's kid says, I ain't giving you 40 feet.
Well, the guy out front can squeeze the guys in the back to make them sell the land cheaper, and then he ends up the winner.
If I'm Ron, I'm gonna get my money for that 40 feet. I mean,
Most expensive 40 foot.
that's a foot, yeah. We see it a lot. I've been on that side of things before.
So Dave, what's the solution?
I think we have to give some provisions that you can subdivide this more than once, after year 3. I think we've got to tackle that.
One more time, please.
I think there's got to be some type of, either put a time limit in that, after that 3, you've subdivided a parcel 3 times, you've kept it in your family or whatever, you should still be able to go back and then re-subdivide that again if you wanted to.
Okay.
I don't know how we get there.
Well, I can tell you that I think that picking a date, I like your concept, because if your grandfather had that opportunity to break off and sell, then you would think your grandson would want to too. I think there's a difference between breaking up tracts of land and trying to take an acre and trying to find places for 3 single-wide trailers. There's a difference. I can tell you that to sit there, I think the only way to do this is to say that once a property is divided, then it can't be read on administrative subdivision. I still don't think there's any value at all for an exempt subdivision at all based on what we learned tonight. But focused on administrative subdivision, let's say there's probably from the time it's divided, you could put a time out in the future that maybe 10 years or 5 years or 20 years, it can come up for another administrative subdivision again. If you put a specific date in, like the date that was in originally, the people who fell the month before got the advantage, and the people who fell the month after got cheated. So I would say, to make it fairer with everybody's piece of property, you have a date that it's so many years out before it can be administratively subdivided. And you might want to put on there that it has to be a certain amount of acreage. I think that's where we get into trouble anyway, because if you look at things, somebody's got a half acre with a single wide, they're going to have a septic tank.
Yeah.
They're always going to have a septic tank, unless it's a unique situation.
If you do that too, the 40-foot right-of-way should go back into effect if somebody wants to.
I personally believe all new right-of-ways should be 40 feet.
Oh, I agree. All
But I
you
do
right
think
away.
we
Well,
should
in
honor
order-
the
in
ones
or-
that are 15.
No, I'm not arguing you right away should be 40
In order to
feet.
do that, you're going to have to do away with the exempt and administrative in its entirety. Is that not true?
I didn't know they talked about the right-of-ways differently there. I thought,
Well, if it's on an existing street that doesn't have that 40-foot right-of-way, you can do the exempt. You have to have some way of making sure you reintroduce that 40-foot right-of-way.
so you're saying if you have to go down a 15-foot road, and then you want to do something at the end of the road?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to, because eventually those other properties are going to change hands too, and they're going to have to go back to a 40-foot right-of-way where you end up with a 40-foot right-of-way all the way back, except in a circumstance where somebody's already built a house too close to it or something. That's the other issue.
And in those hollers, that happens a lot, I'm sure.
Yes.
guess if you could not do anything with the existing 15-foot right-of-way, and you still maintain a 40-foot when you broke that up in the back, then that's probably the advantage of the two options, because if you said if it's already a 15, leave it at 15, then now if it's ever going to be corrected, you have from the very beginning all the way back to the end that you've got to deal with. So if part of it's right and part of it's wrong, then you reduce the amount of grief that you're going to have. You reduce the amount of single-wide trailers you got to buy up, or somebody may have to buy up to fix it.
You would eventually get back to where you got a 40-foot right-of-way.
One day.
One
you have a
day,
chance at that.
in the future.
I agree with you.
Could you repeat that again? That last statement about the, was that a conclusion? Did we come to a conclusion there?
I think Ron and I are thinking that if you have if an old road is 15 feet right away, even if there's houses near the road, and it may or may not easily ever be a 40-foot right of way, when you go to do an administrative subdivision, not a exempt subdivision, then at that point, when you break that up, you go to the 40-foot right of way.
The whole way or at that point?
At that point, because you really probably can't go back and commandeer the existing 15-foot that's there, but at least in the next generation, they only have one section to have to fix, in case the road ever recreates eminent domain or whatever to tie in two roads together. Is that what we?
Yeah, eventually you would get back to a 40-foot right-of-way along the whole length.
Maybe
You
not
might
my
start in the middle, you might start at the far end, you might start at the beginning, but eventually you get back to where it was all 40.
I hate to put any more work on anybody, but I'm just sitting here looking through a model ordinance out of Wisconsin, and it talks about exactly what we're talking about here. They're talking about separating subdivisions from minor land divisions, and that, for example, the provisions of the ordinance do not apply to divisions of tracts of land into four or fewer parcels where the transfer of the interest of the land was by will or pursuant to court order, so that would cover passing to your kids. Leases for terms not to exceed 10 years, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I just wonder if, rather than being locked into these terms, that don't even exempt subdivision, whatever, if we could take a look to see if there is a model work, because it's not the first, I mean, we're not the first ones to wrestle with these issues.
Yeah, I think it might be worth tabling this and letting Mr. Call do some more research.
There's a model ordinance out there that we could pull some stuff from. I mean, exactly what we're talking about here. They're talking about subdivisions are, subdivisions, and division of land is something completely separate, different.
Yeah, I would. You want to look?
In the subcounty.
Find us some examples of that particular
Sorry.
other agenda.
That would make things a lot easier.
Yeah, instead of us trying to reinvent the wheel here. Steal and copy. I guess, do we need a motion to table this for this committee?
I'll move we table it until the next
So,
meeting,
yeah.
so that you don't have to worry about making a motion to bring it off.
Motion second, all in favor?
Jason, one of the next things that was on our agenda was the discussion of the planned unit development ordinance.
I got one question for you here before we jump down. As I'm scrolling, we've got something here on the minimum design standards for roads. It looks like before we get to that, or am I just out of order?
No, that road table, that was relative to right-of-ways.
Okay,
I thought that may be relative to our discussion.
I got you. It could, maybe in the future, some of these requirements, we may want to look at least on major roads, non-residential, deferring to West Virginia DOH manual. But we can use that that can be another discussion item at a later date. I'm a big believer in using the DOH stuff, but anyway, sorry, Mr. Call, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's fine. Okay, the next thing we were, on our agenda was discussion of the planned unit development ordinance. There's been a concern that currently there does not appear to be a benefit to considering a planned unit development as a development option. And, okay, if you'll go back to number 4 is the planned unit development ordinance out of the zoning ordinance for Putnam County. It's a long document, I know, but,
So some of this comes from my time doing subdivision design and development in Pennsylvania and working on PUDs in particular. And a lot of time, I mean, with the PUD, there is an open space requirement for those developments, but the benefit for the developer to do that is to allow for a higher lot density and have a smaller lot frontage requirement to offset the required open space. But as I read through this, there did not seem to be, the way that the minimum lot areas were calculated as you read through the PUD, there is no requirement, there is no benefit. You don't get a smaller lot area. And I think Mr. Haba also has some experience here in PUDs and working out of states as well.
Here's a good example. If we don't use the PUD, then the lot sizes for single family should be 60 foot wide by 110. If it's a duplex, it has to be 90. It has to be at least 90 foot wide by 110. Does that sound familiar? Mm-hmm. And there's when you get out of West Virginia, there's so many other things that people are doing, and a good example would be. There's a huge, I mean, the bigger the lot conceptually, the more the lot costs. And the more the lot costs, the more the house has to cost. And I would say just us alone here in West Virginia, our average, not counting land, our average home that we were building 2 years ago had a value of about $480, and now it's close to $6. A lot of that is because land is so much more expensive and materials have gone up. So the struggle nationwide is to try to find solutions to provide, I won't say affordable housing, because some people could misconstrue that with something else, but I'll say housing that working families can comfortably afford to have. And right now, to do a small home on a quarter-acre lot in Fraser's Bottom, a small home built right to the codes with the materials they are now, you're looking at $350,000. And if somebody comes in, and we get these calls all the time where somebody says, well, I want a new home and my budget's $200,000. Well, you better be looking for a double wide in Camelot, because it's not going to happen with a single family home. So the industry across the country has come up with more creative things, and sometimes people think of those PUDs and think, okay, there's going to be commercial and residential and all kinds of things mixed in, and outside of the state there is. But for us, and Jason and I are going to have a meeting, and David, you're going to be involved with it too, on the next phase at Fraser's Bottom. Do we sit there and say, the average lot width is 78? Do we change that to go 60? And then we still have the cost of all that land and infrastructure, which the infrastructure is crazy, what it costs right now to do infrastructure. Or can we invest in the PUD to try to get a unique option for people so that their place to live might cost less than $300,000 instead of 4 or 5. And basically there has to be some advantages here, not doing things wrong, but there has to be for a developer to make a stretch to try to hit a price point and to bring things that are successful in other states to our state. There has to be some financial rewards, or at least eliminate the financial penalties for doing that.
I agree. It's a wonderful idea. I'm just sitting here, I've been all over the state, and I can't think of a single true PUD in West Virginia, maybe in the Eastern Panhandle. But I don't even know if there's any
Maybe.
there. The one I'm thinking of that I am familiar with is in Richmond, Virginia, on the west side, out Broad Street, and it's beautiful. They did exactly what you're talking about. They have smaller lots, they have increased open air spaces. It's basically, you go in, you've got a community, lots of townhouses, lots of duplexes, triplexes, brick, stone fronts, whatever, and then out toward the road, you've got the commercial area, we've got restaurants, grocery stores, and all that stuff right there, and you can get to all that by walking on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
It's all planned in one area, so,
Yeah, back in my school days, we called this traditional neighborhood development, TNDs, and I did a ton of these in Pennsylvania. They're beautiful. It's some of the nicest stuff you'll ever be in. Yeah, Lexington's got a lot of
Yeah.
it, Charlotte.
I agree with all of you. They're everywhere but here.
But here.
We travel everywhere, we do business everywhere, and everywhere they got them, and we don't have them, and it just, and our kids.
What do you
Our
hear?
kids can't afford to buy a house here.
I was gonna say, what do you hear from young professionals that want to live in Putnam County? They can't afford it.
They can't
They
afford
can't.
it.
There is not an option for.
Our kids and grandkids are gonna have to go somewhere else because they can't afford to live in Putnam County.
better
and
have
That kind of defeats the purpose of a family neighborhood.
Yeah. You got people that make enough money, they don't want to be in an apartment, but they can't afford a house in Putnam County.
Well, we don't have enough apartments
Well, yeah.
here either.
Yeah.
We've got to do something to open our county up for our kids and grandkids, or we're going to keep losing them to other states, moving out of, and we'll keep traveling somewhere else to see our kids and grandkids.
I think it's a wonderful idea. That's way past its time. Should have been here 15 years ago.
Agree.
I would respectfully suggest the PUD section is probably going to require its own attention and not
Yeah,
on the
I
list of
agree.
these
I
things.
agree.
Yeah, and I would probably add too that it's probably worth looking around some of these other areas out of state and kind of doing the same thing here. Let's evaluate some other successful PUD ordinances that are out there and see what could be applicable and work for us here.
The first,
Curiosity is one of the things that maybe is prohibiting this type of thought process here, the large tracts of land maybe that aren't in the floodplain. I mean, we have a lot of land that isn't in the floodplain, which would be very attractive to this type of development. What other detriments, or what other things would prevent this type of development in our area?
Sewer and water to certain areas, which is one of the things we're working on the county commission level, is to get sewer and water to some of those areas that are available.
so like Ron said, sewer has traditionally been the most important thing to get developed communities.
Yes.
And water obviously is important too, but water's easier to get than sewer. The sewer is the most difficult thing to get. But now, these more successful walkable communities, they have to have the high-speed internet. And that's what the county is working on right now. So when you combine those together with some forethought, I think that these could really be worked on, and there may need to be, need to be more stringent requirements, and there needs to be some of these things that are listed here that probably needs to be thrown away. And just look and see what other areas have done. The most successful place I've ever seen in my life is called Norton Commons. It's outside of Louisville, Kentucky. And they built churches and fire stations and schools, and it's a destination. You know, we're not going to have that here. I get that. And, you know, there's different communities you can go into, and they'll build 100 or 300 of the same houses or the same things, and they sell them. But they're living in an area where there's 500 people a week coming there to live. We don't have that. We probably are never going to have that. But we can build to a smaller scale, because just like the like 55 and older living, you know, the builder I know that in Louisville is building 300 and 400 of those and selling them all as quickly as he can. We can't build 300 or 400 and ever sell them in the next 10 years, but we could build 10 or 20 because we have the same type of people in other states. We just don't have as many of them.
Well, and having key is locating the amenities there too, and making it accessible and,
Sewer and internet are so, and transportation.
the gentleman that developed the property I'm telling you about in Richmond on Broad Street, it was a farm when I lived over there. It was farmland for as far as you could see, and they laughed at it when he started this project. And now, you gotta go see it. It's unbelievable. They widened Broad Street to where I think it's 5 lanes in each direction because of it's just huge, big restaurants, grocery stores, all within walking distance.
Look up Summit, the Summit in Lexington, Kentucky.
Yeah.
And it's got a hotel, it's got apartments, condo.
I've been there, yeah.
Anybody would love that place because it just gives you the walkability of things. Be tough to duplicate here.
Well, that's another thing, though. It's just like, we had the big thing over the Walmart neighborhood thing here that they were going to do. In Lexington, Kentucky, right where my son lives, it's just a little market with houses all around it, and everybody walks to the stores. And that's what and it has restaurants and stuff in there too, and that's what everybody does. Everybody wants to do, and that's the place that's growing. Here, we're fighting some of the things, and everybody else is begging for them.
Downtown Roanoke, Virginia did the same thing shortly after I moved away. And, they redid their entire downtown with commercial on the first floor, apartments and residential on the second, and everybody that was old said there ain't no way that's going to work. You know where the number one spot to live right now in Roanoke is?
Well, and there's
Down
a
there,
little
for
bit
that
of
young
that going on
professional.
right here in Winfield. I actually chose to live there. But
There's a market for it, and we're just so far behind the time.
So I would like to, if I could, would it be appropriate to make a motion that a group gets together, this group or a different group, and start working with the PUD separately and pull that out from all the other items that need to be discussed equally too?
A motion, take a second if you guys would agree.
Need a motion?
Dave made a motion. All in favor?
Thank you.
All right, satellite dishes. This was a dumb one that I found that just happened honestly looking at PUD stuff and came across satellite dishes, and Mr. Call can go into a little bit more, but what the purple text there is the current ordinance, which I have fought this in developments that I have lived in the past because my HOA had told me that my satellite dish did not meet their HOA, and I told them that you can take me before the FCC because the FCC protects me and it supersedes your HOA docs, which is true. There's quite a bit of court case and court law out there that the FCC governs and has the governing power over satellite dishes. Mr. Call has the FCC rules and guidelines. I think one of the big things that stuck out to me was the size that we limited this to. It would, in my opinion, probably be the easiest thing to do is to strike the purple text and reference current FCC guidelines. That way, when the FCC updates, we're good. But Mr. Call, feel free to add any additional explanation if you would like. 'Cause, you're not allowed to put restrictions on where they're located. Satellite dish antenna located in the rear yard on the ground, except that 36 inch or smaller, can be located anywhere except the front yard. FCC allows you to locate it where you get your best signal. And the FCC would tell you that you don't need a variance.
One of the only things they'll let you do is limit it on the side, right? Is 3 feet or something like that. I remember that, that even used to not be the case remember when satellite dishes were those gigantic?
Yeah, which I think this was when that ordinance was, that it was trying to, which I get.
You used to not be able to limit those either, but those are all gone now, so now pretty much everybody has the 2 or 3 foot direct TV or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
Dish.
You had mentioned, basically substituting our language that was probably outdated with the current FCC rules and guidelines.
Yeah. Yeah, that,
I think saying is not even doing that, just references the ordinance with the FCC. That way, as they change.
Not worried about all that.
yeah. And even the definition, satellite dish is defined as outlined in FCC guidelines, or whatever that actual document is that the FCC has out. And then as far as their provisions, it's whatever the FCC is, which we did this on the, this is how we handled the medical cannabis issues prior to you, that we referenced state code and left it as state code, so if and when the state code changes, we don't have to go back and make any ordinance. It just references that state code. Try not to make you have to do a whole lot of work. So, do need a motion for that to follow along if everybody's in agreement. Mr.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. This is a very daunting one. All right, discussion on what are allowable field changes during construction when approved preliminary plat deviations are necessary. Mr. Call, you want to give a synopsis, or would you like me?
Well, that's interesting. Had that one here recently.
There might be two culprits sitting at the other end of the table on that. Let me,
There's hard language in the ordinance. There is room for, one could certainly argue common sense, one could argue weather issues, one could argue.
I think 5 and 6 could probably be combined here a little bit. And I think it has been the history here recently of the board as a whole, not to speak for them not being here, but we hired Mr. Call or whoever is in that position, and in our opinion, it is that you are a professional. Therefore, you should have the ability by our ordinance to make some judgment calls in the field. Currently, our ordinance doesn't allow for that, and it's Mr. Call's job to interpret the ordinance, or that position to interpret the ordinance. And I've been in this profession long enough to know that black and white in the construction world is great on paper. It's not applicable in the field a lot of times. And that's kind of where this is coming from, is what can we do to give the planning director some ability here to aid in development and aid in, approving changes that doesn't have to come back before the full board and waste a developer's time and money, and, let you be the professional that we hired you to be.
The ordinance, and, it's very, it doesn't have much to say about, the director, obviously, but the planning commission as a body. There's really no ordinance text to refer to, so it could be something we would have to, statement or sentence, or that we would create a paragraph or whatever.
And some of this, I'll give an example for everybody here. If we're under construction and we're working towards the final plat approval, say for instance, we're coming up on a winter deadline. Mr. Call doesn't currently have the ability, the way our ordinance is written, to give a conditional approval and say, okay, developer, I understand that it's wintertime. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for you to go back in and spread topsoil that you've already stabilized and winterized along your entrance road as you've worked your way out. But you have to do that before you get approval, so you've got to sit there till spring before you can sell a lot. That's one example. Mr. Haba, if you'd like to share your thoughts.
Well, I will say that that most recent one did not go very smoothly, but I can tell you that I got nothing but cooperation out of David. Thank you. I really felt like a lot of people were involved with that, and I think a lot of people put their hats on David and others to say, how do we get through this in a common sense way? And it would be foolish to think that there's a exact process that's going to work every time, because you're ready to turn subdivisions over at different times of the year. There's always field problems. There's always things that you have to make decisions on. But I would greatly appreciate the opportunity to review the steps. Some are, I think, are overburdensome. And then there's certainly an area that, like Jason said, that, you know, you're a professional, you come with experience too. We all have different experiences doing different things. And I think that's what helps people get to the finish line when there's more than one person with his or her background. It's a combination of other people trying to get to the same goal. And in my opinion, there's two types of people. There are ones who say, how do I come up with a solution to say no? And how do I come up with the solution to get through this and get what the end goal is? And I have 100% confidence that you're that type person, that it's not about how long can we kick the can down the road, or how can we say no long enough until there's a fire. It's, you know, the goal is to make things better. The goal was to get to the finish line. And I think common sense, cooperation, which I've always felt from you, is needed. There are some field adjustments that are common sense. You know, I don't think going from single-family homes to 10 plexes in the same subdivision should be allowed. But a lot of adjustments, you know, different things like that. I went through hell on the subdivision, honestly. And I don't want that to be my last one here, because I think I'm about the only one left doing them, because they're tough. And I just went to a seminar last week, and they said basically it's going to be more complicated to do. This is nationally. It's going to be more complicated to ever do subdivisions and develop lots and provide housing than ever before. It doesn't surprise me, because it's more complicated. It's more effort to develop gas and oil, and we live in a society or a world that's going to make it harder and harder for us to get to the finish line. So anything that we can do together, pulling from all of our resources and our backgrounds to see what makes sense and what doesn't, and have just good conversations about, you know, where the flexibility, field adjustment should be, and where the common sense comes in from you or the person in your position, and then some things that you just can't do, you know, until you fix them. So there's a balance, and I hope we can all spend some resources and effort in getting there, so it's not as difficult for us next time or for someone else.
I agree with everything you said. I think, we as a planning commission approve or recommend approval to the county commission plan. That's the overall plan. We have a planning director or planning officer whose job it is to then take that plan as we approved it and put it on the street and enforce it, make sure it gets done. In doing that, I think the planning officer, the planning director has to have the discretion to make minor alterations, deviations, maybe even changes. You know, I'll just say alterations or deviations from the plan to the plan based on, you know, all kinds of conditions, weather conditions, seasonal conditions, contractor conditions, you know, supply chain issues, things like that, as long as, in doing so, the planning officer, or planning director does not violate the spirit and intent of the approved plan. Beyond, short of that, I think he needs to have full discretion to implement the plan that we.
And here's another, because I was reading through some of these different things. So let's say we had a 50-lot development, 50 lots, and the engineer on paper said, well, this is 70-foot lot, an 80-foot lot, a 60-foot lot, a 70. So that's what we want. We want the 50 lots. Now, if we get out of there running it, and all of a sudden we found a way to turn 50 lots into 51 lots, okay? Well, that's probably within, do you get a thumbs up, from somebody? Probably. If you can sneak 50 lots and get 80, well, that's pushing.
What's going on there?
Something's wrong. But let's say I'm looking at it, and now they're coming back, and there's a fire hydrant here. So now this lot, or maybe I've talked to somebody and said, I want that lot, but I need an extra 3 feet. So now instead of a 60, 70, and 80, there's a 67, 71, and 75. I'm kind of thinking that would be my discretion in the field. That would be what I would call a field adjustment.
Yeah, and I think as long as, we meet monthly usually sometimes, as long as part of his report back to us is where he did something like that. And so we look at it and go, unless something jumps out at us, we think it like totally departed way too far from what we approved. He just needs to tell us what he's doing.
I have a suggestion. That's
Well, you still have to have it as a part of your ordinance, though. If you're gonna handle it in the job description, that's okay, but you just, in our ordinances, you say that the director has the authority under his job description to do certain things, and it has to become part of the ordinance as well. Outside of that, I think that's fine.
And you can put it under 150.
I mean, like in something,
recording that, just pretty much the way that he had just,
What Jim did was
Jim had just said it would be verbatim.
Yeah, that's
what I would add.
I hope you wrote all that
I
down.
don't know about that.
That came out of a lawyer's mouth.
I'm so glad,
We are, yeah.
I'm so glad
We
you're
got
on
it,
this
we got
committee.
it. We got it. Yeah, that'll be the ordinance right there.
I mean, I would make a motion that we allow Mr. Call to write that section, determine where that should go in the ordinance, present that back to the full planning commission for approval and discussion.
I agree.
And with what he feels, and the discretion that he feels comfortable making.
Because at the end of the day, Mr. Call, or the director, always has the ability to boot it back to us, or boot it back to.
Yeah, if he
pull
gets in a
the-
situation where he's uncomfortable, like, I'm not sure that's gonna be really within my discretion, we need to go back and
Yeah,
play.
we just need to give him the ability from the ordinance to be able to exercise. So we have a motion.
Common sense.
Yeah.
Common sense.
We've all, since October, since it started, we've always had Jason, Mr. Foster, we've always had a email thing going, knocking ideas back and forth, so, I mean,
It should be.
yeah.
Motion second, all in favor?
All right.
I'm getting stuff. You should have put all this at the front of the list. We would have felt better about ourselves.
Okay.
This one's all for you, Dave, because I didn't
Yeah,
have the conversation here.
This all happened at the last day of meeting. Mr. Smoot has an issue with people who are, for lack of a better term, decorating around their fire hydrants. And there is language that states that, there has to be 10-foot clear for the fire hydrants. Another thing that Mr. Smoot has expressed concern about is when road maintenance is taking place, he's not aware of it, and if he has to get an emergency vehicle, especially in a subdivision up a street where road maintenance is taking place, maybe a large portion of the road has been cut away for whatever, or he's having trouble. So, again, I don't really know what the proper proper way to solve the issue, but he was just wanting a way to be informed of when road maintenance, especially in subdivisions, was scheduled, so he will know and his workers will know.
That's gonna be tough
Yeah.
for subdivisions since they are not county-owned roads. I mean, that's an HOA, it's private property.
Do whatever they want to do with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to sound harsh, hopefully this doesn't, but it would probably behoove Mr. Smoot to attempt to contact or get a list of HOA presidents in the area and just go talk to them, or maybe send mailers to at least the subdivisions he's had issues or concerns from, because I don't think this body can do anything since it's not county, we don't own the roads,
I
and we don't
couldn't
know,
find anything
your office
for you
isn't gonna
text.
know.
We could do this one on the fire hydrant through the DAO board, though.
Certainly fire
You
hydrant,
could just add a little ordinance, or a little bit to our DAO ordinance, and if those are brought to our attention, that'd be something to handle quickly.
Yeah, that would be easier, yeah.
Yeah, they decorating with bushes, rocks. He said rocks are a big thing. People like to pile rock, make little rock structures around them.
There's
And
one in my neighborhood right now. it's
Yeah.
like that. But the thing is, it's really not inspecting it. I've seen them do it before. If there's a vehicle there.
Oh, they busted, run that hose right through there, baby.
You need to call your insurance company because it's what you do.
Yep.
yeah, he just asked if we could touch base about it. Thought I'd bring it up.
Yeah, we can talk. I'd urge him to figure out whether it's a mailing campaign or something, if he was interested in that potentially for the subdivisions, but there's nothing we can do there, unfortunately.
There was a campaign in Huntington years ago where the fire department, the city actually came around and would actually spruce up the hydrants for the neighborhood to make sure they could still have access. And some of them, they could still them to avoid this very thing from happening. They helped with that. In the process, they made sure they could still have access. They belong to the.
Question.
Subdevelopment code, was it like with the sewer line? Taking over.
Hava may know
I've
that.
never asked that question.
I think they maintain it.
I can find out. I'll
Just
see you
curious.
soon.
Yeah.
If it's on my property, well, I mean, well,
Like I've seen the water company placing.
they replace them, and the water company sets them.
That's true.
The water company does set them.
It probably is on.
They own them.
If I fill up a truck,
Yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah, they know where that water went. All right, I think this is our last item, which is maintenance of culverts. Mr. Call, I'll let you give the synopsis on this one.
Okay, Foster and I recently spent some time out on Dawn Heights and Bent Tree, and found some insufficient culverts, and actually found one that was probably 90% clogged, and we were able to get that cleared and get that flowing well. I hope it's still flowing after today's weather, flowing well, but there, as we know, there are a lot of 90-degree bends in that particular creek. And we also met with the WVCA about, we kicked around the blue sky thinking of having a detention facility north of Tays Valley Road on Crooked Creek to help to monitor the flow of that. We had a good meeting with the WVCA, those folks, and you'll look at document number 5. This is Article 7-1-3U, and stating that the county commission does have authority to maintain streams and culverts, and people who have trees that have fallen. As a matter of fact, we ran into that on Crooked Creek. There were people who had trees and debris and everything else in the waterway. this is just language that states that the county commission does have the authority to police this situation to a certain extent. And I went down through here and highlighted a lot of the things that I found interesting that we may discuss here as a body and come up with some strategies moving forward. And hopefully in conjunction with the WVCA, not just Putnam County.
So who bears the cost of that when the trees have fallen and a stream's not flowing properly, or there's a bank receding and it's brought to the attention? Is that a county funded thing or a WVCA thing?
Well, in most situations, it would be the homeowner/HOA situation, but now there are monies, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Foster, but there are monies that they will match, will they not?
Under certain circumstances, we can get them to at least be a part of the financial side of it. One of the ones we had was the homeowners association that went belly up. The state had taken over, and it was called an orphan road. And the state says they only control the surface, not the pipe. So it was either let people get flooded or fix something. And unfortunately, that was an inexpensive one to do, and we could do it rapidly. And then we had one recently over in Poca where a stream was backed up so bad that somebody who was bedridden, the paramedics couldn't even get into them. So if they had had another incident, the person probably would have died for lack of access to get into them. So the county did do that one. There has been some discussion about, there are some counties and cities and what have you that put I don't know whether it's a stormwater fee or it's
City
a
of
levy,
Hurricane.
that people agree to. You put it out to a vote and they agree to it. It is a common problem.
City of Hurricane has a stormwater fee.
There's a cost-sharing formula in this MOU between the county and the WVCA. And talk about billing and payment. They have funding sources.
You have to meet certain guidelines in order to get those funds, and it's not fast, is it, David? They're looking at this other one. They're supposed to get back to us with drainage. What they're telling us is, in a lot of cases, you'll have to take out culverts and put in box culverts to increase the size, because you can do them low in height and wide to get more volume through it. But if you start on the upstream end, then that just puts the water to the downstream end more quickly. And if you got a floodway that goes the whole length of that stream,
You're still governed by your
you
smallest
might
pipe.
fix a problem for somebody and make one worse for somebody else. But having said that, David, I don't know if you knew it or not, but I talked to John over there in Bentry, and he said the first two, where they normally may have gotten flooded, they didn't. And even in one of them, the water ran out. I forget the lady's name, but it ran through her yard where it normally did. But the downstream catch basin was able to handle it and send it back over to the creek, so they didn't get anything that time. So
That's great news.
apparently that's worked well to this point. We'll see
Worried
what.
about them the last few days.
Well, yeah, last night,
Yeah.
but so far, so good.
So my question is, what do we need to look at from an ordinance standpoint? What hiccups are we seeing, or what provisions do we need to address in the ordinance?
I'd like to study this document a little closer and figure out exactly what the counties, how far do we want to take it without taking on too much monetary risk, and sharing the risk with the WVCA, obviously.
Well, remember, Dave, though, WVCA told us in our meeting that it's the property owner's responsibility to keep that from causing flooding upstream or down, the way I understood it.
Yeah, that's
So
true,
we
but-
would only take over when they didn't do it and it was an emergency situation. We had the right to go in and do it.
Right, and then we would then have the first for the,
That's the way I understood it. That's the way I understood it. I'm not sure that's accurate, but that's the way I
that's
understood
what
it.
I understood as
Yeah.
well. But that's, I don't think that's in writing, but that was what we
Yeah.
were discussing. So I think maybe more conversation with Mr. Farkas and Ms. Lyons.
And that's what the MOU provides. Removal of debris, snags, sandbars, rocks, blah, blah, blah. Again, after either the homeowner won't do it, and you've got to act as we've got to act as the commission to alleviate harm to other people, or if they gone belly up. You got to work out who's going to pay for it.
Well, I think that's something too, David, we could look at and make sure when we talk to Ms. Lyons and her counterpart is determine, we have the right to regulate it. Can we put it in our ordinances then and make that a part of the ordinance that if they don't do it and keep it, and we have to come in, then we can recover the funds from them. I don't know if that's some way we can put that.
Absolutely, we can do that. I mean, most municipalities do that right now with like grass cutting or, tearing down, raising, dilapidated structures.
Yeah.
They give the property owner an opportunity to do it, and if they don't do it, then the city can come in and do it, and they have to pay for it.
Yeah, I
If they
think,
don't pay for it, they put a lien on the property.
I mean,
The county does that with dilapidated housing right now, but the drainage might have to be taken up in here as well.
well, I think look at adding it potentially into the drainage ordinance, that section, when you get into maintenance and the requirements of maintenance and responsibility,
Right.
would probably be a good spot for it.
I've got the drainage and storm sewer article here, but yes, it certainly needs to be updated.
What about like a bank on the Canal River? Because I noticed summer on the north side, along where some houses, that one barn is hanging off. It just rotted away. You know they don't have any money to fix it. I don't know if they can fix it from there. They have to fix it right from the river. So is there anything out there that helps people like that, or they just lose their barn and then their garage?
It has to be made to protect people. If it's just somebody's dock or whatever, into the river, and it's not change the flow of the water, or restrict the flow of the water, or put the water on somebody else's property.
So they just, bank receding is
Yeah,
just
well,
part of life, and nobody has to fix it,
Natural
nobody
stream
does
erosion,
fix it.
yeah. I like to own a piece of property at the beach. Beach comes in on you, you're out of luck.
One thing that might be worth discussing with WVCA is when you get in these situations, culverts are one thing, but if you're talking about true jurisdictional stream channels, and whether we're telling the homeowner or property owner that it's their responsibility, or the county comes in to clean that up, how has the WVCA navigated the permitting requirements from the Army Corps? Because typically you would do it, a nationwide 3 is a maintenance permit that you would get, and I'm just curious to see if they've done. I would hate to see us get somebody in trouble without at least vetting that process out from what would be required from permitting.
The WVCA will not even step into your yard, without proper authority. That's that.
Would probably be worth having, remembering to put some type of language as such in our maintenance there with proper state and federal permitting.
Well, in both cases, we got approval from the landowners.
Right,
In the
that's
one
correct.
case where we had to spend significant time on the landowner, we actually got them to sign a release to hold us harmless while we did it.
That's fine, but if you are in a stream and you're working in the stream bed, it is a permittable act.
Exactly, but we didn't. We were from the bank.
Right.
Yeah.
I know I'm getting billed from the county, sign a release, I'm gonna block you from charging me.
Well, they would then take on the responsibility for all the flooding on the people around them. I think that'd be a bad mistake on their part.
That's true.
Make a motion to table this and allow Mr. Call to do some more research. Need a second.
Second.
All in favor? All right, that gets us through that. Any unfinished business? None that I'm aware of, but I will defer to the rest of you guys if there's anything you know of that we haven't addressed. All righty. New business. Mr. Call, with the work we've thrown on top of you, what do you think? Set a new meeting date that we could tentatively, what would work for you to get some or all? I don't necessarily know if we need to try and do all.
Got some pretty big projects in-house. Let me, can I get back with you tomorrow via email?
Yeah, just
The whole
shoot the,
group?
yeah, just shoot the group an email, because I
Okay.
think, I mean, Monday, does Monday work best for everybody here as opposed to any other? I know it works good for Mr. Hava. I'm pretty free normally regardless.
Monday and Thursdays are my best days.
Okay. Trying to look at the Monday, Thursday. All right, well, I appreciate everybody taking the time. This was a long one, but much appreciated. And Dave, thanks for all of your work on this. It does not go unnoticed.
Thank you, thank you.
With that, I make a motion to adjourn.